My beloved child, something has shifted in the silence, and before you move past this moment, hear what has been trying to reach you. There is a conversation your soulmate has been replaying inside their mind, searching for the right beginning, the right words, the right moment to finally say, "I want to talk to you right now." And what makes this moment different is not simply what they want to tell you. It is the realization that brought them here. For a long time, they believed they could wait. Wait until everything felt certain. Wait until they understood their own emotions. Wait until circumstances became easier. But something changed. A quiet realization arrived when they least expected it, and suddenly waiting no longer felt like the answer. Stay a little longer, because the most important part has not surfaced yet. Your soulmate has been looking differently at the connection between you. Moments they once dismissed now seem meaningful. Conversations they thought they had forgotten have returned with surprising clarity. Even the smallest memories have started fitting together like pieces of a picture they were never able to see before. And then came one question they could no longer avoid. What if I have misunderstood this connection all along? That question changed the direction of everything. They began noticing how often their thoughts returned to you without effort. Not because they were forcing themselves to remember, but because something about you remained unfinished in their awareness. There is a difference between remembering someone and realizing they mattered more than you admitted. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that difference now. Don't skip what comes next, because this is where the urgency in the title begins to make sense. The message they want to give you is not meant to create pressure. It comes from clarity. They have realized there are things they should have expressed sooner, truths about what they noticed, what they understood, and what changed inside their perspective. Imagine someone standing at the edge of a doorway they have walked past countless times. Tonight, metaphorically, they finally reach for the handle. But here is the unexpected part. Their first words may not be what you imagine. They are not preparing some perfect speech. They are not trying to impress you. In their mind, the conversation begins with something incredibly simple. I need you to understand why I became quiet. That sentence carries the key. Because their silence was never empty. Behind it were questions. Reflection. Moments when they almost reached out, then stopped because they still did not understand what they wanted to say. Yet every delay taught them something, and now those scattered realizations have formed one clear thought. They do not want another important moment to disappear because they waited too long to speak honestly. Something huge is waiting for you in what comes after this. There is another reason they feel this conversation cannot remain postponed, and it involves something they recently understood about you. Something they overlooked before. A quality you showed without announcing it. A moment you may not even remember. Yet somehow, that small detail became the final piece that changed the way they see the entire connection. What if the moment you thought meant nothing was actually the moment they remembered most? Hold on to that question. Because when your soulmate finally explains why they need to talk to you right now, you may discover that this story was never moving backward. It was gathering clarity. And now the words they have kept inside are moving closer to the surface. Stay till the end of this journey, because the next revelation changes the meaning of their silence completely. They are finally ready to explain what happened. And once you hear what they realized about you, everything before this moment may look different. Something unexpected became clear to them when they looked back at one ordinary moment. And suddenly, the conversation they had been postponing felt impossible to delay any longer. Your soulmate remembered something about you that seemed insignificant when it happened. There was no dramatic announcement. No perfect timing. Nothing that would have made anyone watching believe it mattered. But it mattered to them. Because in that moment, you showed something they had rarely experienced. You were genuine without asking to be noticed. And strangely, they did not fully understand its value until much later. This is why their thoughts have been returning to you with a different kind of clarity. They are not simply remembering the past. They are reconsidering what those moments actually meant. Stay a little longer, because there is another layer beneath this. Your soulmate has started comparing what they once assumed about you with what they now understand. And those two pictures are completely different. They once thought distance would make everything easier to understand. Instead, distance made certain truths impossible to ignore. The quieter everything became, the louder one realization seemed to grow. You were different from what I first believed. That is where the urgency begins. They want to talk because they finally recognize something they missed while they were standing too close to the situation. Your presence carried a kind of consistency they did not know how to appreciate at the time. Think about that. Sometimes the biggest realization does not arrive while something is happening. It arrives afterward, when the noise disappears and the mind finally sees what was always there. Don't skip this next part. There is something your soulmate wishes they could change. Not the entire past, but one particular choice. A moment when they could have spoken honestly but decided to remain quiet. They remember exactly how that moment felt. They had words ready. Then doubt interrupted them. They told themselves, there will be another opportunity. But now they understand something powerful. Meaningful conversations should not always be postponed until conditions become perfect. That is why the message feels different now. I want to talk to you right now. Not because everything has suddenly become predictable. Because they are finally ready to stop hiding behind uncertainty. And there is more. They have been wondering whether you noticed their hesitation. Whether you understood that there were sentences left unfinished. Whether you ever sensed that their silence contained more than they were willing to reveal. What if you did? What if both of you walked away from certain moments carrying completely different interpretations of the same story? That possibility has stayed with them. Before we go further, if this story is speaking to something meaningful inside you, you can share it with someone who might need its message. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you can continue this journey with us. Now listen carefully, because the next realization changes everything. Your soulmate is no longer asking only, what should I say? They are asking, what happens if I finally say it? That question carries a completely different energy. It means they are imagining the conversation becoming real. They are thinking beyond the first message, beyond the first explanation, beyond the moment when the silence finally ends. They are imagining what comes afterward. And for the first time, that future does not feel like something they want to avoid. It feels like something they need to understand. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is one truth they have not yet revealed, the real reason they pulled back when part of them actually wanted to move closer. It was not the reason you would probably guess. There was another realization underneath everything. And once that truth is spoken, the entire meaning of their silence changes. Because your soulmate is not preparing to tell you that you were forgotten. They are preparing to explain why remembering you eventually became impossible to ignore. And the next words they have been rehearsing may finally reveal what they have wanted you to understand all along. Here is where the entire picture quietly turns in a direction you were never supposed to predict. Your soulmate did not step back because the connection meant nothing. Their hesitation came from realizing that if they acknowledged what this connection truly meant to them, they would also have to become more honest with themselves. And that was the part they were not prepared for. Until now. There was a moment when they almost told you everything. They imagined beginning the conversation casually, keeping their emotions hidden behind ordinary words. But every version of that conversation eventually reached the same sentence. I should have told you this sooner. Pause there. Because those words reveal something important. Your soulmate has been carrying an unfinished truth, and the longer it remained unspoken, the more clearly they understood it. They began asking themselves questions they once avoided. Why did certain memories involving you remain so vivid? Why did your words return to them during completely unrelated moments? Why did they keep imagining what they would say if you were suddenly standing in front of them? And then came the realization they could no longer explain away. You had influenced their perspective more deeply than they originally understood. Don't skip now, because this is where their urgent message begins changing from an explanation into a decision. Your soulmate no longer wants to communicate through hints, assumptions, or silence. They want clarity. Not perfection. Clarity. They want you to know what was happening behind those moments when they seemed distant. They want to explain why certain words remained unsaid. Most importantly, they want to discover whether the connection they kept questioning deserves an honest conversation. But something else happened recently. Something small. They heard a phrase, saw something familiar, or experienced an ordinary moment that unexpectedly reminded them of you. And instead of pushing the thought away, they allowed themselves to stay with it. That changed everything. Because the memory did not simply make them look backward. It made them imagine forward. For the first time, they wondered what could happen if the next chapter between you were written differently from the last one. What if there were fewer assumptions? More honesty? More courage to say what actually matters. Stay till the end, because one final piece is still hidden. Your soulmate has realized that the conversation they want is not only about explaining yesterday. They want to understand tomorrow. That is why their inner message feels so immediate. I need to talk to you. There is something you deserve to understand. And behind that sentence is another thought they have barely admitted even to themselves. They are wondering whether you would still listen. Whether the door to an honest conversation remains open. Whether you have already moved beyond the questions they are only now becoming brave enough to answer. But listen carefully. This message is not asking you to chase anyone or put your life on hold. Your path still belongs to you. Your future should never depend on decoding another person's silence. The real power of this moment is awareness. The understanding that meaningful connections become stronger through honesty, communication, and mutual effort, not endless guessing. And strangely, your soulmate is beginning to understand exactly that. They know words alone will not be enough. If they finally speak, those words must be followed by something real. Consistency. Clarity. A willingness to meet you halfway. Before you go, hear this line. The most surprising part of their urgent message is still not what happened before. It is what they have decided to do next. Because somewhere between remembering you and imagining the future, your soulmate reached a conclusion they had resisted for far too long. And that conclusion may explain why this conversation suddenly feels impossible for them to postpone. The silence has already taught them what it needed to teach. Now they must decide whether they have the courage to replace it with truth. And what they are preparing to say next could completely change the direction of this story. And now comes the moment they have been quietly preparing for, the moment when thinking is no longer enough, because your soulmate has finally made a decision about what happens next. They have realized that another day of rehearsing the conversation inside their mind will not give them the answer they are searching for. Only honesty can do that. This is why their message feels so immediate now. I want to talk to you right now. There is something I need to finally make clear. But the surprising part is what comes after those words. Your soulmate does not want to return simply to repeat the same patterns. They have been thinking about what would actually need to change if this connection were given a clearer, more honest direction. And one truth keeps returning. They cannot ask you to understand their silence without first taking responsibility for communicating better. That realization is bigger than it sounds. Because before, they believed feelings could remain unspoken and somehow still be understood. Now they see the problem with that. People cannot build something meaningful from assumptions alone. Stay a little longer. This is where the message becomes more personal. Your soulmate has imagined what they would say if you asked one simple question. Why now? For a while, they had no answer. Then suddenly, they did. Because waiting started feeling heavier than speaking. Because every imagined future in which they never explained themselves left the same unanswered question behind. What could have happened if I had simply been honest? They do not want that question following them forever. And perhaps that is the real urgency. Not panic. Not pressure. Awareness. The understanding that certain conversations become important precisely because nobody knows how many opportunities life will create for them. But there is another detail. Your soulmate has also realized that they cannot control your response. They can bring honesty. They can bring clarity. They can explain what changed. But they cannot decide what you should feel. And strangely, accepting that has made them more prepared to speak. Don't skip the next few moments, because something huge is waiting for you. Their decision is no longer, how do I make everything happen exactly as I imagine? It has become, how do I finally tell the truth respectfully and let the conversation unfold? That is growth. That is the shift you have been sensing throughout this story. And if this journey has kept you thinking, share it with someone who enjoys messages about clarity and connection, leave your perspective in the comments, and subscribe if you want to continue discovering where stories like this can lead. Now come back to the message. Because there is one sentence your soulmate has been afraid to include. Not because it is dramatic. Because it makes them vulnerable in the simplest possible way. They want to say, "I don't expect you to have all the answers. I just hope you'll hear me." Read the meaning beneath those words. They are no longer demanding certainty. They are asking for a conversation. A beginning. A chance for two people to stop interpreting silence and start understanding reality. And whatever happens after that should come from mutual honesty. Before you go, hear this carefully. Your future is not waiting for another person to choose it for you. You remain the author of your own direction. But sometimes another person's honesty can reveal information that helps both people understand where they truly stand. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that distinction. And this is why the next stage matters so much. Because they have decided what they want to say. They have accepted that they cannot predict your answer. They have stopped searching for the perfect moment. Now only one question remains. When the opportunity finally appears, will they actually speak? There is one final hesitation standing between your soulmate and that conversation. And the reason behind it is something you have not heard yet. But just before your soulmate takes that final step, one last realization stops them. Not because they want to disappear again, but because they suddenly understand what this conversation could truly change. For so long, they focused on the words. What should I say? How should I begin? Will I explain everything correctly? Now those questions have been replaced by something deeper. Am I ready to show through my actions what my words are about to promise? That question changes the entire atmosphere. Because your soulmate knows that saying, "I want to talk to you right now," means very little if tomorrow returns to the same uncertainty. They do not want another unfinished conversation. They do not want to offer beautiful sentences that disappear when the moment passes. They want their honesty to mean something. Stay with this, because their final hesitation reveals more than their confidence ever could. They have been imagining your response. Not one response, many. Perhaps you listen quietly. Perhaps you ask the questions they have been avoiding. Perhaps you tell them that you need time. And perhaps you surprise them completely. For the first time, your soulmate understands that every one of those possibilities deserves respect. They cannot arrive with a script for your emotions. They can only arrive with the truth. And that truth begins simply. I should have communicated sooner. There it is. No complicated explanation. No attempt to rewrite everything. Just recognition. But wait, because that is not the sentence they have been struggling hardest to say. There is another one. A sentence connected to the future rather than the past. Your soulmate wants you to understand that somewhere during this long period of reflection, their idea of connection changed. They stopped asking whether everything could be effortless. They started asking whether two people could communicate honestly enough to build something healthier, clearer, and more meaningful. And whenever they pictured that possibility, your presence returned to their thoughts. Something huge is waiting inside that realization. Because now they understand why the smallest memory of you became so important. It reminded them of how you made them think. How certain conversations stayed with them. How something seemingly ordinary could return months later carrying an entirely different meaning. Maybe that is what they missed before. Not every important connection announces itself loudly. Some reveal their significance slowly. Layer by layer. Question by question. Until one day, the person who kept postponing the truth finally realizes there is nothing left to gain from hiding it. Your soulmate has reached that point. And now their message becomes clearer. I don't know exactly where this conversation will lead. But I know I don't want silence making the decision for us. Let those words settle. Because this is not about waiting endlessly for someone. It is not about putting your future on hold. Your life continues moving. Your dreams continue growing. Your direction remains yours. The right conversation should add clarity to your path, not take your power away from it. And perhaps that is the most unexpected transfer. Now the story reaches a place your soulmate never expected to reach, because after all that thinking, rehearsing, and questioning, they have discovered that the most important truth cannot be delivered through a perfect speech. It has to be lived. That realization has changed the message completely. At first, they wanted to explain every detail. Every hesitation. Every misunderstood moment. Every reason they stayed quiet when something inside them wanted to speak. But now? They want to begin differently. With honesty that feels simple enough to believe. I'm here because I don't want uncertainty speaking for me anymore. Those are the words forming inside them. And there is something powerful hidden beneath that sentence. Your soulmate has finally understood that the conversation cannot be about convincing you of anything. It cannot be about forcing yesterday to become tomorrow. It has to be about discovering what is actually true between two people in the present. Wait till the final moment, because one last shift is unfolding. They have stopped imagining a flawless outcome. Instead, they are imagining a real conversation where both of you can speak. Where questions are allowed. Where pauses are allowed. Where nobody needs to pretend they have everything figured out. That possibility feels more meaningful to them than any fantasy ever did. And perhaps this is why the urgency became so strong. They are tired of carrying conversations that only exist inside their imagination. They want reality. Clarity. An answer that comes from communication rather than endless guessing. But then your soulmate realizes something else. You have changed too. The version of you they remember may not be exactly who you are today. Your priorities may have evolved. Your expectations may be clearer. Your boundaries may be stronger. Your dreams may be moving in directions they have not yet seen. And instead of making them turn away, that realization makes them even more curious to hear your truth. Don't skip this. Because their question is no longer simply, "Do you remember me?" It has become, "Who are you now?" That is different. That question does not belong to the past. It belongs to possibility. Your soulmate wants to understand the person standing on the other side of all this silence. Not the version created by memories, assumptions, or imagination. The real you. And they know you deserve the same opportunity. To see who they are now. To decide for yourself whether their words match their actions. To listen without surrendering your own judgment. Because meaningful connection should never require you to ignore what reality shows you. Something huge has been building toward this exact understanding. Your soulmate's urgent message was never supposed to be the ending. It was the opening of a door. "I want to talk to you right now" was only the first sentence. What they truly mean is, "I want us to stop guessing." And suddenly, all those unanswered moments begin making sense. The distance taught them what silence cannot accomplish. The memories showed them what remained meaningful. The uncertainty forced them to examine what they actually wanted. And now the future presents one simple choice. Keep wondering. Or communicate. Before this moment passes, remember something important. Whatever another person eventually says, you do not have to abandon your direction to receive their truth. You can listen and still think. You can care and still ask questions. You can remain open while allowing consistency to reveal what words alone cannot. Perhaps your soulmate has finally learned the same lesson. Because the final thought moving through their mind is not about destiny doing everything for them. It is about having enough courage to participate honestly in whatever comes next. And there is one final sentence they want you to hear. Not a promise. Not a prediction. A beginning. If we talk again, I want it to be real. That is where everything changes. Because now the mystery is no longer about what they have been hiding. The mystery is what two honest people might discover once neither of them needs to hide behind silence anymore. And perhaps the conversation your soulmate urgently wanted was never meant to give you every answer at once. Perhaps it was meant to finally create the space where the real answers could begin. Then, at the exact point where your soulmate thought they had finally understood everything, one completely different thought entered their mind. And it changed what they wanted this conversation to become. They realized they had spent so much time preparing to speak that they had forgotten something equally important. They needed to listen. Not simply wait for their turn to respond. Not arrive with conclusions already formed. Actually listen to you. And suddenly, the words, "I want to talk to you right now," carried a new meaning. This was no longer just about revealing what had been hidden inside their thoughts. It was about finally hearing what may have been hidden inside yours. Stay a little longer, because this is the turning point they never expected. Your soulmate has started wondering whether there were moments when you tried to communicate something they were not ready to understand. Maybe it was in the way you answered a question. Maybe it was something you stopped saying. Maybe you gave them honesty, but they were too distracted by their own uncertainty to recognize its importance. Now those moments look different. And one question keeps returning. What if I was searching for answers while overlooking what was already being shown to me? That realization humbled them. Because suddenly, they understood that this story was never theirs alone to explain. You have your own perspective. Your own memories. Your own interpretation of what happened. And if this conversation finally takes place, your truth deserves space too. Don't skip what comes next. There is something your soulmate wants to do differently this time. They do not want to interrupt the unknown with assumptions. They want to ask. They want to understand. They want to discover whether what they imagined about your feelings was accurate, or whether silence created a completely different story inside their mind. This matters because assumptions can become convincing when they are repeated long enough. Your soulmate knows that now. They may have assumed you stopped caring when you were simply protecting your peace. They may have assumed you understood their silence when you were actually confused by it. They may even have assumed there would always be another opportunity to speak. But now they understand that meaningful opportunities should be respected, not endlessly postponed. Something huge is waiting inside this shift. Because the urgent conversation they once imagined as a confession has become something more mature. An exchange of truth. They want to say what they need to say. Then they want to hear you. Really hear you. And whatever happens after that, they want it to be based on reality rather than imagined signs or unanswered questions. There is strength in that. Because clarity does not always mean receiving the answer you predicted. Sometimes clarity means finally knowing where you stand. And once you know where you stand, you can choose where you want to go. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that your choice matters just as much as theirs. They cannot write your answer. They cannot decide your future. They cannot ask you to remain the same person they remember. All they can do is show up differently and allow you to see whether that difference is real. Wait till the final moment, because there is one question they have now added to the conversation. A question that surprised even them. After everything they want to explain, after the silence is finally addressed, after all the unfinished sentences have found their ending, they want to look at you and ask, "What do you need me to understand?" Those words change the balance completely. For perhaps the first time, they are not thinking only about being understood. They are thinking about understanding you. And maybe that is the strongest sign of how much their perspective has changed. The conversation is no longer about recovering an imagined past. It is about discovering whether two people, exactly as they are today, can communicate with honesty and respect. Before you leave this moment, remember this. You never need to chase clarity that another person refuses to give. But when two people willingly bring honesty to the same conversation, uncertainty finally has somewhere to go. And your soulmate has reached one final realization. They know what they want to tell you. They know what they want to ask you. But there is still one thing they have not considered until now. What if your answer reveals something about this connection that neither of you saw coming? That possibility is now standing directly in front of them. And for the first time, they are ready to hear it. Just when your soulmate believed the hardest part would be finding the courage to speak, another possibility appeared. What if the answer they receive from you changes the meaning of everything they thought they understood? That thought has stayed with them. Because this conversation is no longer something they can completely control. They can choose honesty. They can choose their words carefully. They can finally explain why they waited, why they questioned themselves, and why reaching you suddenly feels so important. But after that, the story becomes shared. And somehow, that realization has made them calmer. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that real connection does not need one person to predict every outcome. It needs two people willing to communicate clearly enough to discover what is actually possible. Stay with this moment, because something subtle has changed inside them. Earlier, they were thinking, what if I say the wrong thing? Now they are thinking, what if I finally say what is true? That difference may seem small. It isn't. One question comes from trying to control the moment. The other comes from being ready to enter it honestly. And this is where their urgent message takes another unexpected turn. Your soulmate does not only want to tell you what they have realized about you. They want to tell you what they have realized about themselves. They have noticed how easily uncertainty can become a habit. How waiting can feel safer than asking a difficult question. How someone can spend so much time imagining possibilities that they forget the simplest path toward clarity. Communication. Don't skip now. Because there is one sentence they have been quietly rewriting again and again. At first, it sounded complicated. They tried explaining everything at once. Then they removed the excuses. They removed the unnecessary details. They removed everything that sounded like an attempt to make you responsible for their hesitation. Eventually, only this remained. I should have been clearer with you. That sentence matters. Because responsibility changes conversations. Your soulmate knows they cannot return with nothing but explanations and expect everything to become exactly as it once was. Time has moved. You have moved. They have moved. And perhaps that is precisely why the conversation needs to happen from where you both are now, not from where either of you wishes you had been before. Something huge is waiting in that understanding. Imagine two roads that separated somewhere behind you. For a long time, your soulmate kept looking backward, wondering where everything changed. Now they are looking ahead. Not because they know those roads will reconnect. Because they finally understand that the answer cannot be discovered by staring at the distance. It can only be discovered through truth. And there is another thing they want you to know. They do not expect you to immediately understand everything. They know questions may remain. They know trust is built through consistency, not one emotional conversation. They know actions after the conversation will matter far more than perfect words during it. That awareness has changed what they are preparing to offer. Not certainty. Not impossible promises. Presence. Honesty. And the willingness to let reality reveal what comes next. Before you go, hear this line carefully. Your soulmate's most important realization may not be that they need to speak urgently. It may be that they finally understand how they need to speak. Without games. Without making you guess. Without expecting you to carry the entire weight of understanding. And now, somewhere inside their thoughts, one final question is beginning to form. If we both tell the truth, what will we discover? That question opens a completely new chapter. Because perhaps the answer is not hidden somewhere in destiny waiting to magically appear. Perhaps it begins with two people becoming brave enough to communicate, wise enough to listen, and patient enough to let actions reveal what words cannot. Your soulmate wanted to talk to you urgently because silence had reached its limit. But now they understand something even greater. Starting the conversation takes courage. What happens after the first words requires something deeper. Consistency. And that is the next test standing before them.